Firstly, I hope this overview is informative and somewhat intriguing. And secondly, it's not that the other group is wrong. It's just that we, group PPG, are more right. So I think it's safe to say that we were excited to represent the pacing guide. As a whole, the research that we have reviewed in preparation for this brief presentation, as we could have talked about this all day long, has convinced us even more fully of the necessity of pacing guides to assist in the delivery of a guaranteed and viable curriculum. Although most, if not everyone in the room, has had some experience with pacing guide or curriculum guides, the following narration will hopefully provide more of an in-depth commentary on the pacing guide.
What are pacing guides? Essentially, pacing guides are a structure that provides support for teachers. Now, admittedly, any kind of pace can be stressful, but an observation of the related speed by which a department is going can be helpful in many ways, none of which include competition or beating your coworker to the finish line. Instead, and this will be fully discussed later on, a pacing guide can assist in setting a baseline for classroom modifications, such as scaffolding, extension activities, and for valid baselines for unit benchmarks, in that departments can compare strategies for best reaching students within similar material. Slide 2. Importance of pacing guides. We have kind of like a 5-fold checklist here, and we're not just talking about any old pacing guide. We're the top 5 qualities of efficient pacing guides. They need to be planned and systematic, in that a pacing guide is not only a weekly breakdown of standard coverage, but that it can also take into account how content can engage students on appropriate learning levels, relevant learning topics, and at most completely individualize the lesson plans. Part 2 needs to be inclusive and consultative. A pacing guide is not a doctrine, so there must be flexibility to modify both content and pace for differing student needs. However, the guide does provide a baseline from which to collaborate and focus intra-department incentives. Number 3, of course, the pacing guide needs to be led by curriculum professionals. There needs to be multiple hands on the document, including auditing from curriculum specialists. Number 4, it needs to be cyclical in nature. The pacing guide should revisit and overlap content in an attempt to create continuity and a complete exposure to the course material. And lastly, it needs to be sustainable. It needs to last. The pacing guide needs to be structured so that it will maintain and last for many reasons, the most important being that the modifications of the past that ensure best practices and procedures can be replicated and improved upon, ever strengthening the validity of the actual pacing guide. Slide 3, the following is just an example of an actual pacing guide. This simple document represents, hopefully represents, a timetable including unit labels, standard linkage, learning objectives, and links to relevant resources.
To conclude, basically pacing guides rock. And the necessity of these documents is vital to ensure that structure exists within the course design. As the presentation progresses, this point will be emphasized, along with the understanding that teachers benefit more from the presence of the pacing guide than without them.